Clarity and simplicity. Welcome back. So let's continue where we left off. You should remember this slide from before the questions. The first point to note is that if you are going down the design and build or EPC route, then there would almost certainly be two works information documents. The employer's works information, which would describe the functional performance requirements plus any constraints, and the contractor's works information for his design. This is the equivalent to the contractor's proposals under the more traditional forms of contract and would form part of the contractor's legal offer to the employer. The next document is the site information. The site information is supplied by the employer and describes the site and its surroundings, or what the contractor can expect to find when he turns up on site. It would therefore cover such things as existing layout, ground conditions, and so on. The next document that is part of the contract is the contract data. This again has two parts. Part 1 is filled in by the employer and sent out to contractors. It has two main functions. The first is to reference all the options that are to be used and the other documents which we have mentioned. The exceptions would be those documents yet to be generated by the contractor. By referencing these documents, they become part of the contract. The second function is to enable further flexibility. For instance, if following completion of construction, the employer wants a longer maintenance period, or defect date in NEC speak, they just put a different timescale in the contract data, rather than redrafting individual clauses. Any variable stated in the contract data is either referenced as such or is in italics. For instance, the term project manager is always written in italics in the clauses of the engineering and construction contract. If Peter is stated in the contract data as the project manager, then only Peter can do the actions assigned to the project manager in the contract. Likewise, only Sid, the supervisor, can do the actions assigned to the supervisor. Contract data part 2 is filled in by the contractor and returned with their tender. It references the documents they generate, such as the activity schedule pricing document under options A and C, and any design proposals in the contractor's works information. It also references their key people and additional pricing or cost information, for example, their tendered fee percentages. The last document we need to mention is the one which goes right at the front of the contract. This is the form of agreement, which typically covers who the contract is between and when it came into existence. Now let's explore how NEC3 achieves its second main objective of clarity and simplicity. Firstly, with the exception of the adjudicators and framework contracts, all the contracts have the same basic structure of 9 core sections. These are shown on the slide for the engineering and construction contract. With a few exceptions, sections 1, 2, 4, and 5 mainly cover the administration of the contract if little changes. Section 3 covers the contractor's obligations in terms of time to do the work and programming requirements. Within Section 1 are the early warning and risk reduction processes, and Section 6 covers the definitions of compensation events, the process for their notification, submission and acceptance, and the criteria by which they are evaluated. More on this when we discuss the stimulus to good project management objective. Sections 7, 8, and 9 are in practice rarely used, as it typically means, in the case of title, that a party in the supply chain has become insolvent, an insurance event has occurred, or that one of the parties is terminating the contract. As previously stated, with a couple of exceptions, this sensible structure is common to almost all members of the NEC3 family. In addition, the order of the wording within each section and the words used are kept as similar as possible across the whole family of contracts. Another way in which the contract achieves clarity and simplicity is to have clarity of roles for those representing the employer. In the engineering and construction contract, the supervisor is there to check on quality, and the extent to which he or she does this is defined in the works information, in combination with defining what tests and inspections the contractor has to do. The project manager in the engineering and construction contract has a dual role as a contract administrator and in managing the contract on the employer's behalf. In the role of contract administrator, there is one of the few bits of case law on the NEC3, whereby the judge emphasized that the project manager had to be impartial in his interpretation of the contract when evaluating a submission from the contractor. Yet at other times, he or she also has to act in the employer's best interests. To illustrate the difference, let's give a quick example. The project manager may receive 2 compensation event quotations based on different ways of dealing with the compensation event. he or she has to evaluate them impartially against the criteria stated in the contract. Having done this, he or she can then select the one which best matches the employer's objectives for the contract, be it least time, least cost, or best quality. In contrast to other forms of contract, there is only one general statement of how the employer, contractor, project manager, and supervisor shall act. They act as stated in this contract. So, for any given circumstance, the who, the what, and the by when is stated in the individual clauses of the contract. In the case of the project manager, when he or she has to accept or not accept a communication from the contractor, the individual criteria for making that decision are also stated. Lastly, to achieve clarity and simplicity, the authors of NEC3 wrote it using guidelines for writing plain English. For instance, sentence length is kept below 40 words, and if it exceeds this, then it is broken down into bullet points. They use the present active tense both for clarity and to encourage action. They state maximum timescales for the characters to do actions and respond to each other. They eliminated the use of the words fair and in the opinion of from the contract, and minimize use of the word reasonable, as these are highly subjective and tend to lead to dispute. Instead, they tried, and by and large succeeded, to express much more precisely things such as defined terms in Section 1, definitions of compensation events, and the criteria by which they are assessed, and, as previously stated, criteria by which the project manager accepts or does not accept communications from the contractor. Lastly, the contract is about a third of the length of traditional contracts, being between 4,000 to 4,500 words, depending on the options chosen, instead of the 12,000 to 15,000 words of traditional engineering and construction contracts. So to summarize this section on clarity and simplicity, the NEC3 family of contracts are much shorter than their rival forms, so there is less text to become familiar with. They are better structured so that you can find the relevant words, and having found them, it is written in plainer English, so that the average construction professional can understand the contract and know what they have to do and by when. All of this should reduce misunderstandings and disputes, and allow the parties to focus on delivering the contract successfully. The next section, after the questions, will explain how NEC3, in stimulating good project management, helps the parties to do just that.